everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a video that I have been so highly anticipating. I have been wanting to film this video for a hot minute now, but I've been honestly a little intimidated given that I feel like no matter how hard I try, I'm going to invariably forget something, and that's okay. We are going to do my favorite thing, which is A, talk about books, and B, talk about books that are my favorite. In fact, it's a great day. I've been wanting to do this video for a hot minute. I feel like it's such a good indicator of a person's reading taste, obviously. I love watching these videos and getting an idea of what people like and just kind of seeing what people's favorites are, what books stand the test of time. Rachel actually just posted her favorite books video a couple days ago, and ever since then I've been just kind of thinking about my books on repeat, and honestly, it's a Friday night, I don't have any other plans, and what better way to spend time and commiserate with my favorite books. Truthfully, I am primarily a fantasy and romance reader. I have been a fantasy and a romance reader my entire life. I would say I've mostly been a fantasy reader, and then I discovered a love for romance. So I've got a good mixture, I would say, here between fantasy and romance, on top of a couple other genres that I don't necessarily read from often, but I do have a couple very specific favorites, as well as just some lifetime favorites. I'm already realizing that I should have expanded my categories here and grabbed two other books, one of which I don't own. That's okay. Let's go ahead and just hop into it. I'm not gonna get up and go grab my copy. If we're talking like lifetime classics here, my favorite classics are going to be Fahrenheit 451 and Frankenstein. Do not make me choose between the two of them. I love them so much. In case you're curious, but let's actually get into the stack. There's a list here. I'm gonna actually jump over here to the side and just go through a couple things really quickly that are more honorable mentions before we get into the really good stuff. I'm not the biggest thriller reader, however, I do have some definite favorites. If you've read either of these books, you're good people. No, really, if you've read either of these books, you know the certain theme that occurs between these two. That's one of my favorite themes of all time. I absolutely love and cherish it. The Women in the Window by A.J. Finn. Wild. I actually really did like the movie that Netflix did about this, and then The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I feel like this is a pretty standard classic thriller, but it's funny because when I was growing up, I used to read primarily fantasy. I discovered a love for romance, particularly romance that occurs within fantasy, and surprise, surprise, the origin story tracks. I read a ton during like elementary, junior high, high school, all of that, but when I got to college, I stopped reading for a hot minute. I think honestly, even when I was in high school, I didn't really read a whole lot. I think like a whole lot of us, I got a little bogged down by the assigned reading in school, and I just stopped reading entirely. So I, like many people during the panorama, I picked up reading again, and it was partially thanks to my roommate, who at the time was picking up and loving thrillers, and I just kind of read them because A, she liked them, and B, we had them at the house, so I picked these two up, and I am so grateful that I did. So really, if I think about like what brought me back to reading, I like to say ACOTAR, but technically I read these two before ACOTAR. These two books and then She Was Gone. These series of books, if you will, are what got me back into reading. Like, these are what directed me to then find ACOTAR and then to really start reading again. And if you haven't read these books already, you should. I don't know why you would be looking to me of all people for a thriller recommendation, given that I'm probably the absolute least qualified, but these are some good ones. I think about those often. Just picking off the top of the stack here, I just want to I would be remiss if I did this video without talking about Twilight in some form or fashion. If you know me, that means that you know how obsessed with Twilight I actually am. I did a reread this fall and completely annotated the absolute ever-living crud out of this book, and I had the absolute most fun I have ever had. It was one of the very first books that I like fully annotated, and it was so fun to go and I got like a super cheap $3 thrift store copy and just wrote stupid stuff like, "Poor BB." I wrote that on a page. I would thoroughly recommend looking up your, like, not necessarily childhood, but your young adult phased favorite books and finding a cheap used copy and annotating the absolute heck out of them. I had the absolute most fun. Team Edward forever, and that's all I'll say on that. It's actually a very overcast day at the moment, and I kind of now want to watch Twilight after this. So Oops. Okay, last, we'll say longtime lifetime fave before we get into the more recent favorites. One of my absolute favorite magic systems and favorite magical elements is dragons, specifically the way that Christopher Paolini wrote in Eragon. The whole talking dragons, the whole mind connection thing, and then you work in magic and a language system, and I'm just saying, I feel like if you're looking for the ultimate dragon book and you love dragons, and if you haven't already read this, you need to, just for the lore of it all, even if you don't necessarily love the plot that happens. However, I've seen some people say that the plot itself doesn't really stand up, given that he did write this book when he was, what, like 16? And he wrote it in... So I have the Barnes & Noble Collector's Edition that was done in 2018. I just looked at 2018. It was like, this book was not published in 20... It's because this edition was. The original text copyright was 2002. So it's quite an older book in terms of the current fantasy trends. However, the magic system, the lore, the language that he built an entire language for this book series. I love it. I listened to the audiobook for Eragon last summer and I stinking loved it. I know some people say that it doesn't necessarily stand up. I, however, really did. I started re-listening to Eldest last year, but I only got about halfway through and I don't necessarily love... That's probably my least favorite book of this series, and so I need to get back to listening to that. However, if you're a fan of dragons, this is the magic system that you need to know. Okay. The issue is that I like to talk with my hands, and I also love all of these books, and I love holding them, and then the fact that I then have to let them go is a little challenging. Yeah. Where do I want to go from here? It's like picking between my favorite children. Like, which children do I choose to feature first? The answer is all of them. I'm gonna ignore the fact that I have to pick at least one to talk about. Okay. Like I mentioned with Twilight, if you know me, you know that I love Mariana Zapata. I absolutely love her writing. I am a slow burn fan. One of my favorite things in the entire world is a really good chunky slow burn romance. If the book doesn't have at least some element of that tension, angst, slow pacing, angst that slow burn generates, I'm not gonna like it. So sign me up for a giant chunky book that's nothing but slow burn. I feel like Mariana Zapata writes her books specifically for me, and I love her for that. I just recently did a Mariana Zapata tier ranking video if you're interested, like which of my favorites and like where I rank all of her books. My favorite of them all is going to be All Roads Lead Here. My second favorite is going to be From Luke Off With Love. This is the absolutely beautiful, stunning Fairy Loot edition that I will never, ever let go. You will have to pry it out of my cold dead hands. And then I'm thinking that my third favorite, surprisingly enough to me, is actually going to be Luna and the Lie. I touched on it in that ranking video. However, that one has just kind of snuck up on me. It is, and it might be because it's one of the ones I've read most recently, but it's just the one that I think about on repeat the most often. Anyways, if you've not read a Mariana Zapata, I would start here with All Roads Lead Here. And maybe you could start with Luke Off. I don't know. I feel like both of these are great starting places regardless. I love them so much. Okay. The Chestnut Spring series by L.C. Silver. Honestly, all of L.C. Silver's books rank really quite highly in my opinion. However, I do prefer Chestnut Springs over Gold Rush Ranch. If you're curious which of these books is my favorite, look no further. Heartless is probably, comparing it and All Roads Lead Here, there is absolutely no comparison to make, so I couldn't pick one of these. So if you're looking for like my all-time favorite romance, it would probably be one of those two. However, Heartless, if you're wanting everything, if you're wanting a bit of a spicier time with a single dad and just the most tense, angsty, longing, everything in a romance, that is Heartless. However, I do really like the rest of this series as well. Theo from Reckless. Basically, this entire series is beautiful, stunning, amazing, and everything to me, and I would fully recommend it. It is cowboy romance, but it's more small town cowboy romance, so if you're not someone who's sure if they're down for a yeehaw time, maybe do Chestnut Springs. I do, however, from her original Gold Rush Ranch series. I do really like books 2 and 4, but if I had to pick a favorite, it would definitely be A False Start, which is the last book in the Gold Rush Ranch series. Elsie Silver writes some of the best grumpy, brooding, age gap couples. Pretty much all of her books have some sort of an age gap, and I'm into that. If you're not, you won't be, but I am, so thanks, Elsie. If I had to pick a top 2 romance authors, those two are gonna be my friends. However, something that I just really recently read, Mile High and The Right Move by Liz Tomford. I very recently read these two. However, particularly The Right Move, but also Mile High, I cannot and will not ever get these out of my head. These Elsie Silver books and Miranda Zapata books just play on repeat. In case you're ever curious what my brain looked like, it's basically that and anxiety. So there's some insight. I love these books so much. I had heard literally all of the good things about The Right Move. However, I wasn't anticipating Mile High, and I just love them both. They're also super pretty. I think if they had uglier covers, I would still like them. However, these just make the experience even better. This one I'm kind of torn if I put it in the honorable mentions category. However, it absolutely cannot go. It's going to be The Burns We Carry by Murray Good. She recently did a cover redesign, and I need the new book. Like, I need air. Anyways, The Burns We Carry is everything to me. I obviously love Murray, but this book is everything to me as a standalone book. Like, as a book by itself. Book 2, I know she's working on the second book, and I'm so excited because I feel like I'm gonna like that book even more than I like this one. However, you get a really grumpy forest ranger and a team of brothers who just adopt our female main character into their family, and it's just so special. I love this book. I have to put it down now and talk about something else. Kind of upsetting. Oh wait, more things that I like. Darn a luck. Okay, we're going to talk about this one series, and then we're going to go into fantasy romance. Yet again, if you know me, you would know that one of my favorite series of all time, and in fact, I have a hard time ranking some of these specific bigger series. However, this definitely is like top 5 all-time series. It's going to be Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I was going to say I love and cherish this book series. However, it hurts so bad. And I love it. So I do love and cherish it. It's a weird bag of emotions that I have, and I can't rationalize it either. Red Rising is beautiful, stunning, everything to me. Pierce Brown has a way of writing things not only, I don't know, he's just so, I don't want to say smart because I don't necessarily think it's super challenging to read. There are definitely parts, because this is sci-fi, there are definitely parts that you kind of gloss over, and it's fine given that you're talking about, like, what even are there, like pulse guns, and like, I feel like Red Rising was the easiest to understand in terms of the sci-fi technology elements that occur, and then proceeding throughout the rest of this series, there is a lot more technology specific terms as you proceed into the rest of the world. Book 1, Red Rising, is very much so set in a very small portion of the world, just to kind of set you up for everything that occurs later on, and you definitely get an expanded look at everything that's happening after this book. However, even if you'd gloss over all of these super technical portions, which I feel like some people are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of, and I didn't necessarily. However, what Pierce Brown excels at is his character development. Like, I don't even know how to put it into words. If you think of an author, one complaint, especially I have after reading this series that I can apply to other books I'm going to talk about here in a minute, is that character deaths aren't really solid. I feel like it's pretty popular nowadays to have a character be killed off and then all of a sudden they magically come back and everything's fine. I read this last summer, and honestly that was the absolute best time, oddly enough, to read something like this, because I felt like this could be as dark, sad, brutal. My favorite character was killed off, and then 2 minutes later another favorite character got killed off, and then, oh, I think I'm liking this character. Wait, did I learn my lesson? No, I didn't. I still like them. They got killed off, kind of thing. It's easier to face that when it's bright, sun, shiny, and happy. outside, and I would definitely recommend summer as a great time to read this. So as we approach that season, maybe look at adding this to your TBR. However, this is definitely for some people and not for some people. It was for me, and that's what matters for me for the purposes of this video and, you know, my general personal life. Anyways, moving on. Before we get into the fantasy romance yet again, I'm going to keep you hanging, and I'm going to, because they're sitting back here in this pile, go through some honorable mentions real quick. Spells for Forgetting and The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. These two books, I freaking tell you, I liked Spells for Forgetting. I don't think it's a perfect book. It's very atmospherically beautiful and wonderful if you read it in the fall time. However, if you read it during most other times, I don't know that I would be as absolutely fascinated by it. This is very much a right time, right place kind of book. I am a little biased. Part of the reason I love this book so much is that it was the pick for one of the very first Instagram book clubs that I ever did, so I'm definitely biased towards this book. So I have a lot of special feelings towards this. And then The Unmaking of June Farrow. This book has so many elements of so many things all mixed up into one book. It's a weird mix in between, obviously, a romance and like a second chance thing, but then there's also some magical realism situation. There's so much suspense in this book. It's just a weird mixed bag of literally so many things, and I liked it a lot also. Yet again, I do like this cover. Just saying. I'm going to, while we're on the subject of Adrienne Young, while those were honorable mentions, this is officially part of my YA favorites, which you'll notice I technically only, well, I would arguably say 2, but technically 3. Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. This is my all-time favorite YA book. It is a standalone. It's about Vikings. This book makes me so giddy in the sense that I loved it so much. There is so much angst in this book. Found family is a huge, arguably the whole element of this book. You've got a wimpy homegirl who just is getting beat up all the time, and it's just like, she's doing her best. As someone who's also just doing her best, I can relate. There's so many familial ties in this book that it's talked about. However, it's done in a way that's not boring. Like, this family unit here is fairly small, so you're getting to really intimately see these relationships in a way that's not like, I don't know, I feel like you actually connect to them rather than just being like, hi, this is family, yay family. The love interest. If you're not sure if a Viking situation is going to be for you, I would definitely say try this book. Because it is YA, it's fairly short. I feel like the plot is not necessarily super challenging. The other thing, I'm not somebody who enjoys slice of life. Like, I typically like action and things happening. A good chunk of this book is her just chilling around in the village trying to navigate a certain situation, and I loved it still. I loved it a lot. I did read Fable and Namesake by Adrienne Young, and I didn't love those as much. However, this book, favorite YA fantasy of all time. However, a very close second book is gonna be The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. To be fair, I've only read the first 2 books. I need to read the 3rd book real bad. I've just not been in the mood in it, honestly. However, if you're at all interested in this book, the fewer details that you know as you go into this book is the better. There are things that occur, and being surprised is the best approach to read this book. Loved. Without saying more and without giving you too many specifics that would indeed set you up for more knowledge than I think you should have. There you go. I did listen to the audiobooks for book 1 and book 2. I really love these audiobooks. I listened to them on Everend. I'm not sure if they're still available on there. However, they were, at least at one point. Who knows with Everend has a weird selection of books. I feel like they have them sometimes and then they don't have them other times. Like, it's just, I don't know. But I did read the first 2 books on Everend. I would definitely check them out. Moving on. The last YA book that's not really YA, I think I'm going to save that for the very end. Yeah, okay. Let's quickly switch gears for just a second and talk about some indie fanros that are absolutely everything to me. Number 1, yet again, I've only read the first 2 books. However, not only do a lot of people that I know and love and trust, and who also I trust their recommendations, but they also know my personal preferences, and they have recommended it to me several times, and they have finished the series. Books 1 and 2 are the books that I have read of Spark and Glow of the Everflame. I I love these books so stinking much. I literally just ordered these and they came in the mail yesterday. I was definitely planning on getting the physical copy, but I was just going to wait until I got paid and like all of that fun adulty stuff. I finished these, like 2-3 weeks ago, and I have not been able to stop thinking about them and just needing desperately to own them. And that to me is a sign of a really great book. I'm realizing my categories here are kind of falling apart because I totally forgot to mention one of these books, but it doesn't really go in those categories anyways. We'll circle back. Me distracted who? No. I am so stinking excited to get to Heat, but I'm also kind of delaying it just a little bit, because it is like 750 pages. It's quite chunky. And book 4, the final book in this saga, as you know, sagas typically have 4 books. I say typically, anyways. Heat of the Everflame is coming out in June, and I'm gonna wait till a little bit closer to read this book because I know that if I read all of this that I'm sure is going to be a masterpiece and then I have to wait, I'm gonna be upsetty spaghetti. I definitely prefer Glow of the Everflame to Spark of the Everflame. However, Glow of the Everflame is really unique to me in the sense that so much building occurs in this book, but the building is done in a very short and manageable way. Like, it's not a boring building. It's just like things are definitely happening, but things switch gears, we'll say. The other reason that the building in this book is so manageable is because this book in and of itself is 422 pages, so it's not like a crap ton of pages to get through before you ever like actually see anything happening. There's definitely things that happen. The other thing about this series is that there is a slow burn romance. I'll leave you there. If you haven't already added this to your TBR, I need you to do so swiftly. This is available on KU and I absolutely love it. You should read it swiftly. Let's jump into the last indie, previously indie. It was an indie KU fantasy romance when I read it. It's now been traditionally published. It's going to be none other than Serpent in the Wings of Night. Something about me is that I quite enjoy trials in books. I love fast paced. I really do. I like things happening. I like to be panicked. That's an insight I didn't want about myself. I like adrenaline, apparently. I read books primarily for escapism, and anytime that you have fast paced craziness happening, that's the ultimate form of escapism to me personally. This book is that. I obviously like vampires. Maybe not obviously, given that I've not talked about a single fae romance yet. Enemies to lovers is very overdone. This book does rivals to lovers, and it does it in a way that is so much more interesting than your, I don't want to say stereotypical enemies to lovers, but I feel like that's been done so many times at this point. The way that the rivals occur here, I really quite like. I am obsessed with Rain, very much so. He is beautiful, stunning, amazing, everything to me. I love Araya. She is just a girl living in a vampire world, trying to do her best, and yet again, I clearly love characters that are just trying to do their best. Definitely solidly recommend that you pick this up if you haven't already. However, I will just quickly mention Six Scorched Roses in and of itself also makes this favorites list. I love this book. This book is brutal vampire fantasy romance. This is sweet, cute, fun, emotional vampire fantasy romance. They're very two different things. However, you have to, as a favor to me, if you pick up the series, read Six Scorched Roses after Serpent, but in between Serpent and Ashes. So like read Serpent in the Wings of Night, Six Scorched Roses, and then Ashes and the Starcursed King. I would not skip this book. Some of the character development that occurs in this book feels not complete if you don't actually get the actual character development for some of the side characters in this book personally. However, I love Six Scorched Roses. I did also quite like Ashes. I didn't like it as much. I was definitely in a reading slump when I started this book, so I picked the absolute worst time to start trying this fairly chunky book. So I personally don't love it as much as I like the first two, but I definitely am so stinking excited to have more books in this series. I've got Slaying the Vampire Conqueror. I've been keeping it on the back burner for when I just need a Carissa Broadbent vampire fantasy romance because it is so Bailey coded. I don't even know how to handle that information. So that's Serpent in the Wings of Night. I'm going to briefly mention this just because I've only read book 1 in this series, and also we all know and love Outlander. I will say, if you have not watched Outlander and you're looking for new TV shows, I would definitely recommend it. Jamie Fraser, he's one of those characters that I literally just think about and I start blushing. He is everything to me. He's stunning, amazing, everything beautiful, stunning, amazing. Everything stunning, amazing. Jamie Fraser will forever go down as one of the top tier book boyfriends forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Moving on. So you have to like force myself to move on from Jamie, even though I literally said I was going to briefly run through. Put it down. Okay. Yet again, we're going to quickly switch gears because I want to talk about these last books. You know me, you know exactly what I'm saving for the very end. However, this book ranks among the things that I want to say for the end. The Mind Have series is absolutely everything to me. Out of all of these books, I definitely recommend that you check trigger warnings for all of these books, but especially this book. You've got yet another girl in her world doing her best. However, she's not only doing her best, she's doing the best. She is on a revenge mission to rectify some very truly awful things that occurred. Absolutely horrible. The things that specifically occurred are not for the faint of heart. It's not something that's just like a silly, goofy, happy, fun time whatsoever. However, this book has stuck with me so stinking hard. I was rooting for her, which, if you know the plot of this book, is odd. Like, the fact that I was rooting for this character and these characters, given what they were doing, definitely speaks to the quality of the book. This is just one of those weird, unique stories in which things go very, very wrong and you are just kicking back and watching things get worse, and it's fantastic. This probably, like Red Rising, if you're anywhere as moody as I am, I would definitely recommend reading it on a bright, sunny weekend. I read this in 2 days. It's depending on how you want to look at it, it is 5 books technically. I read it on KU originally, and it did count, like, those, whenever you click currently reading, they show up as single individual books. So if you're looking for a Goodreads goal, I'm just saying this one giant chunky book counts as 5 books. The full 5 books total 681 pages. This is another book that I have been anxiously wanting to own a physical copy of, and I literally just ordered a copy of it. I got it yesterday. No, it showed up today. This arrived today, right? At some point very recently. For some reason, because this is a bind up and it's a pretty chunky book, this book tends to be like $36, $37, which I feel like is expensive for one print book. And since I had already read it, I just didn't want to order it. Also, as I say over and over again, I'm horrible at online shopping and I just never click buy now, which I guess is a good thing. But like in this case, I have been anxiously wanting to have a copy of this book ever since I read it, and I finally have a copy of it now, and I feel good. It's a very weird book and series of events to say that I feel good about. Check your trigger warnings. Okay, last but not least, one of my favorite authors is Sarah J. Maas, and I feel like, given the recently published, okay, I'm back. I completely neglected to grab, arguably, I was gonna say one of my favorites, definitely my 3rd favorite. Sarah J. Maas, I feel very conflicted about, because honestly the ending of Crescent City was just not what I hoped it was going to be, and I went back and reread ACOTAR and I just didn't love it as much. So like, I definitely don't think she is the most perfect writer that's ever existed, full stop. Do not think that. However, I do think she has some very, very standout individual books within the series, particularly if I was gonna be all, okay, let's be dramatic and save my favorite for the end. I don't know that I can fully, I can say the 3rd book I can definitely say the third book is my third favorite. However, the top two, I can't. No. We're going to talk about House of Earth and Blood for just a second because I have already touched on Crescent City. And honestly, I had such high hopes for Crescent City being my favorite of her series, but unfortunately, it just wasn't. Given the second books and the third book, I liked Sky and Breath. However, I felt like the ending was what made me like it. Like, if you had taken away the ending, I wouldn't necessarily have liked the majority of the book. And I had a very, if you haven't seen my vlog on House of Flame and Shadow, I had a very viscerally emotional reaction to the end, regardless of how good I thought the end of the book was. So I definitely am very emotionally connected to these characters. However, I think the technical side of things just isn't my favorite, we'll say. I don't think it's absolutely perfect. However, this is definitely my contender for first or second. I can't decide. It's just gonna be a tie. House of Earth and Blood is quite honestly one of my favorite books of all time. I love this book. I love the urban fantasy direction that she went with here in these books. However, Bryce, specifically House of Earth and Blood, Bryce, I love her. I love her. Yet again, I love slow burn. This relationship between this particular couple is the most slow burn. It's actually, no, it's not. It's one of the most slow burns. Technically, it's not the slowest of the slow burn, but it feels the slowest of the slow burn given that their relationship occurs across a shorter series, we'll say. Bryce is unhinged. This book is unhinged. Hi friends, minor jump scare because my phone decided to just up and die while I was in the middle of filming this video. So we're just gonna jump back in 2 days later. I think I left off talking about Crescent City and how it's just like a silly but also chaotic and painful, just a happy fun time, and it's Zootopia in a book, and I love it. Like, if I had to pick an all-time favorite book, this ranks so heavily in that list. Crescent City by far is not my favorite of Sarah J Maas's series, but because of the absolute love that I have for this book, I would still recommend reading it. And Bryce cleans house in this book. I'm going to talk about my third favorite from Sarah J Maas and then end with my absolute most favorite. I obviously have to talk about Court of Silver Flames. I emotionally connect to Nesta on such a deep level. The character development and growth that Nesta goes through, you really get to see her as a character, and the fact that Cassian is just there the whole ride. I think if I had to pick a favorite Sarah J Maas man, it would either be Rowan or Cassian. I think so. Cassian is solidly my favorite ACOTAR male. He's just there for her in the way that she just needed somebody to be there for her, and he just understands her, and he just is willing to do anything for her, and he's so pure. I just love him. I'm so stinking interested to see where the rest of ACOTAR goes, specifically because of Nesta. Like, I just want to see where the rest of her goes. But there's also the whole theme of the female friendships that occur in this book. I love it. Like, I feel like Nesta needed connections to people, and she earned them. I love. My last and ultimate thing, one of my favorite series of all time, and definitely my favorite Sarah J Maas series, is solidly Throne of Glass. The way that it concludes, Kingdom of Ash forever will have my heart. I feel like Throne of Glass, they definitely get better as she writes them. If you're currently reading it, just know that it gets so good. I think about the whole series, like I think back to it quite a lot. However, the way that it ends makes me think back at it more often. To have a, I guess technically 8-book series, the way that you end it is so stinking important because the readers have spent so much time invested in each of these characters, especially because these books are so freaking chunky. She did it. So many characters and so many plot lines all come full circle in this book. I love all of the found family moments that we get. I love all of the friendships that we get. All of these random plot lines that started from the very beginning of the series that you weren't sure had any relevance and thought surely we had moved on from. The way that everything just comes back and makes sense is beautiful. The character growth, that the journey that you get to see, and just the person that she becomes, on top of her love interest literally just being there for her 24/7 to whatever end. All of the connections that she makes and all of the people that are not only there to be there for her, but also at the end of the day, they all share the same goal. I think there's just so many things to be said about this series at large, but Kingdom of Ash specifically has my whole heart. I go back and forth between if Kingdom of Ash or if House of Earth and Blood is my favorite of her books. However, I love them both quite a lot. Obviously, as we're talking about my favorite books, these are the two books that I end on. They are both spectacular, magical, wonderful, everything to me in particular. If you have not read Throne of Glass, you need to. And if you start a Throne of Glass and you have maybe paused or lulled in the middle and you're like, what the heck are these people talking about? Just know it gets so good. I feel like with Throne of Glass, you have to read Empire of Storms. And at that point, if you decide that you are still not feeling it, I feel like that's the point where you can kind of write it off. But if you've not read Empire of Storms yet, you have to continue. You have to. I feel like Empire of Storm is where this series like takes a turn that makes people absolutely hold this series up on a pedestal practically. Like if there was a pedestal here, this book would be on it. Preferably like this so we could all look at it. I love this series as a whole, but I particularly love the way that it ended and the way that all of the dots connected. And I just need to stop talking now about this book before I just never stop talking about it, because it's just that amazing, everything wonderful, beautiful to me. That is all of my favorite books of all time. I feel like this list could alternatively be used as a books I would love to read for the first time again. Thank you so stinking much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you've taken some recommendations, and maybe if you haven't taken any recommendations, it's because you have already read these books and you know and love them, and that just means that you and I are book besties. We have the exact same tastes, which means I respect your tastes, and welcome. I hope you stick around for future videos, and if you wish to do that, you can subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to like this video. And if you've made it this far, if you have a book that you feel like would rank amongst some of these books that I need to read, leave it down below, because I feel like I have not added anything new to this list in a hot minute, and I so desperately need right now a 5-star book that is just going to take over my life, because all I can do is just think about these books on repeat, and I need something new to panic, scream, cry over. Clearly, I will never be able to move on. I think the only solution is just to go further deep and find more things that will completely change my brain chemistry. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.